This is Judaism Unbound, episode 497, Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness, episode 5, Be'er Miriam, the Well of Miriam. We are proud to introduce the third podcast in the Judaism Unbound family of podcasts, Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness, hosted by Jericho Vincent. We are the ancestors of the future. This new podcast offers a spiritual home for listeners seeking to connect Jewish ancestral feminist wisdom with their own svara, moral intuition. Each episode of this limited series delves into a different story of our ancestor Miriam, illuminating her mystical teachings and offering practical tools for navigating and flourishing in personal or political spiritual wildernesses. Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness charts a radical, fresh Jewish path for its listeners and the world. We're thrilled here at Judaism Unbound to periodically feature episodes of Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness here on our feed. But we don't only feature those episodes alone. Lex Rofeberg, that's me, and Rena Yehuda Newman, two members of Judaism Unbound's team, supplement each episode with some Gemara, commentary, as well. We hope that our ideas will help spur you to form your own Gemara, your own commentaries, and channel your unique teachings about this podcast and beyond into the world. We also hope that if you're energized by this podcast episode, or by our work more generally, that you'll head to judaismunbound.com/classes to learn about our upcoming 3-week mini courses in the Anya Shiva, beginning in early September. Without further ado, here's Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness.
My daughter used to do gymnastics. I remember once when she was 10 years old, we went to one of her meets in some giant convention hall in Manhattan. All the girls from her gym wore the same sparkly black and purple leotards. Some of the kids were so itty-bitty, they looked like little chickens. My daughter was more on the chicken side. Each kid went out and they did the same routine on the mat with little variations, their legs all knobby and bent and not quite the right position, repeatedly tripping and falling in inelegant heaps. And then no matter how the routine went, when they were done, each kid would walk down a line of all their teammates and get a high five from each one, sharing these enormous grins and shivering energy and delight in doing this together as a team. I know this probably sounds totally ordinary to you, but to me, it was jarring. One of my core memories from when I was 10 years old is standing at the mechitza, the wooden barrier in synagogue that separates men from women, peeking through a little gap and watching the boys and the men dance together on the holiday of Simchas Torah. They whirled in ecstatic circles, a mass of bodies, some boys like squirrels darting between the legs of men as big as bears, and all of them, no matter their age, in identical dark pants, white shirts, yarmulkes on their heads, caught up in the same ecstatic celebration of their lives as boys, as men, devoted to studying Torah, belonging to this ultra-Orthodox culture and to each other. Belonging wasn't just for boys or men in my culture, but I felt awkward in female-only settings. My skin always felt too tight, my expressions all lopsided. I never knew what to say, how to joke around, what to chat about, how to hang out. The girls around me generally didn't like me. I was a nerd, weird, poor, very uncool. I didn't know how to be a successful girl, and on some level, I didn't want to be. So I went through my childhood as a loner, occasionally catching a glimpse of the ways that boys and men belong together and envying their passion and their purpose and their connections, but knowing that wasn't for me. When I saw my daughter with her gymnastics group, all these kids drawn together with a passion to learn and practice gymnastics, when I saw my kids' ease and familiarity with her culture, it was such a moment of wow, I can't believe I made this human being who knows how to belong with her peers so easily. Belonging is a human need, and it's one most of us don't meet enough, especially as adults. And belonging is always important, but it's more than important when we find ourselves in a spiritual wilderness. because then belonging becomes essential for our survival. Belonging keeps us sane, and belonging is at the center of the critical day-to-day process for getting ourselves out of a spiritual wilderness and into a garden of plenty. Belonging is a core piece of the wisdom of Miriam, and we're going to explore it in this episode along with the Tao de Ching, what it means to be a Miriam person, twilight creations, the mystical meaning of wells, Lakewood, New Jersey, and a practice for bringing Miriam's wisdom to life. I'm Jericho Vincent, your local feminist, trans, Kabbalistic rabbi, and this is a survival guide for a spiritual wilderness. Let's get started on the path. When we last left the people, they had just touched down on the shores of dry land. Miriam led them in song and dance, and then they moved on. The people spent the next 40 years wandering a sun-scorched Middle Eastern desert wilderness. How did they survive? We're told that they ate a magical substance called mun, or in English manna. But what did they drink? The Torah doesn't say, but it does say that in the 40th year of the people's wandering, Miriam dies. Our tradition teaches, by the way, not in the way that regular mortals die, but in an unusual death in which Goddess kisses Miriam on the lips. And with that kiss, Miriam slips through the veil and into the spirit world. Anyhow, the very next sentence, after the one that reports Miriam's death, describes the people complaining to Moses that they're thirsty. They're dying of thirst. Our oral tradition teaches that the reason we go from Miriam's death to the people being thirsty is because up until that point, Miriam had been the channel of water for the people. We're told that Miriam had a special well. It was a rock that flowed with water when she sang to it, and for 40 years, she kept tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of people alive in the wilderness with the water of her rock, which is called Be'er Miriam, the well of Miriam. As soon as Miriam dies, the well dries up and the people, they become thirsty and upset. It's not surprising that Miriam has the power to produce water from a stone. Water flows through Miriam's stories. When she's a child, we're told that she midwives alongside her mother, the Ivri chief OBGYN. So Miriam grows up surrounded by the waters of birth. And then she follows her brother as he floats in the Nile River. And then later when the people cross the sea to freedom, it's right there on the shore next to the water. Then Miriam calls out, Shir Adonai, sing right now. I think it's fair to describe Miriam as a kind of water spirit for our people and for us, which makes sense for a survival guide, both because water is essential to our survival in a barren wilderness, and because water is a good metaphor for surviving in difficult landscapes. One of my favorite spiritual texts, the Tao de Ching, says, "The supreme good is like water, which nourishes all things without trying to. It is content with the low places that people disdain." No matter the obstacles, no matter how unpleasant things are, water organically sinks and weaves and rises and finds a way. And as it does, it lovingly nourishes the seeds of what's next in whatever landscape it's traveling through. Like water, we make our way through the wilderness, never in a straight path, but finding whatever way we can and trying to nourish seeds along the way as we make it to the other side. So back to our story. Miriam just passed. The water has dried up. The people are thirsty and afraid and complaining to Moses. Moses asks Goddess, what should he do? Goddess says, take your sacred staff or branch, use it to assemble the people, and speak to the rock. It will produce water for the people. The mateh, the sacred branch, is a tool to gather people together, but Moses doesn't seem to understand that it's the gathering that's the catalyst for the water, the sustenance to emerge. Instead, he takes the branch, gathers the people, and lost in his fear and his anger, he shouts, "Listen, you Morim! Listen, you Morim! Are we going to get you water out of a rock?" Then he hits the rock with the branch, as if it's by his force, his violence, that he's going to be able to produce what the people need. Water does pour out of the rock and the people drink, but it's not a triumph. Moses did not follow Goddess's direction about how to gather the people, how to sustain them. He thought it had to be by his force. He didn't understand that it was the divine presence that emerges when people gather with sacred purpose that would produce the water. And Moses is punished as a consequence of this. Pirkei Avot says that if 3 people gather at a table and speak words of wisdom, they eat at the table of Shekhinah, Goddess. If Moses could have gathered the people for sustenance and used thoughtful words to bring them together, divine presence would have rested there. There are 2 songs of redemption that are sometimes sung on Saturday night at the conclusion of the Havdalah ceremony. One is a song celebrating a male leader, Eliyahu, who, the song declares, will bring redemption single-handedly, Moses' style of leadership.
Eliyahu ha-navi, Eliyahu ha-tishbi.
The other song celebrates Miriam, who, the song says, will dance with us, who will bring us to the waters of redemption.
Miriam tilkolitanu, leagdil zimratolam.
That male leadership, that Moses leadership, it brooks no competition. Moses is the greatest, and it's his force of will that will make things happen. Remember last episode? He sings a song about himself. Miriam takes a different approach. Miriam speaks in the plural. She's about gathering the people together, reminding the people of the power they have when they gather. Let's back up for a second. What's that name that Moses called the people when he shouted at them? Listen you, Morim. Are we going to get you water out of a rock? So in most Hebrew Bibles, that word Morim is translated as rebels. But because the Torah is not written with vowels, this word that's usually pronounced as Morim can also be pronounced as Miriam. So another way of reading this text is Moses shouting, "Listen you Miriam people, are we going to get you water out of a rock?" There's evidence that parts of Miriam's story were erased and appropriated by men in an attempt to shore up patriarchy. So when I see Moses shouting at the people, calling them rebels and Miriam people, my spidey sense starts filling in some details. I see a people who adored Miriam as their leader, a people unafraid of female leadership, a people reluctant to transfer their allegiance to Moses after Miriam's death. I see Moses shouting and name-calling and hitting as an attempt to seize the people's loyalty to his patriarchal agenda. But I am grateful for this record of Moses shouting at the people because it gives us that name, Miriam people. These were the people who every day gathered around Miriam's well to fill their cups. It was a community that met regularly, whatever else was going on, wherever they were in the wilderness. They situated themselves by finding each other around the well and drinking together from Miriam's waters. A river of love from Miriam bound them together, and a river of necessity and appreciation for each other as they went through the ritual of gathering the water they needed, a practice of survival. And probably not just water. The mystical master Reb Nachman of Breslov explains the Hebrew word for Miriam's well, be'er, is a homophone for the word for wisdom or insight. Reb Nachman says that Miriam's spirit is eternal, and when we learn wisdom in places of suffering, we draw on the be'er, or the wisdom of Miriam. Those Miriam people back then were drawing Miriam's wisdom along with her water, and Miriam, the eternal spirit of Miriam, invites us to do the same. Put the well of Miriam in the middle. Gather regularly for wisdom and practice. That's how we survive. What is the well of Miriam? It can be any form of wisdom and practice that we're willing to meet with other people regularly to draw in. So perhaps we can understand Miriam's well to represent the transformational power of gathering regularly to sustain our spirits with practice and wisdom. And this is the fifth core teaching for our survival in a spiritual wilderness. Miriam's well is a traveling oasis. Miriam's people are those who keep meeting at that oasis together, wherever they are on their journey. In the spiritual wilderness of this moment, the wisdom we need does not come from rigid structures or preordained paths, but from our ability to listen, adapt, and find nourishment even in the most barren landscapes, to gather together at the rock of Miriam's well, and to drink deep. Wells are powerful magic for our people. Look at the ancient stories. Mother Hagar finds a well in the wilderness, and her destiny changes from scorned concubine to powerful mother of an enduring lineage. She names that well Be'er L'chai Ro'i, the well of the living one who sees me. Eliezer meets Mother Rebecca at a well, which, by the way, the Kabbalists say is the same well as Miriam's well. Father Isaac redigs the well of his father Abraham. Father Jacob meets Mother Rachel at a well, and this meeting is the pivot on which the people move from becoming a family to becoming a whole people. These are small groups of people finding deep connection at that place where water rises from the heart of the earth. Wells were central to our ancestors because they often lived in barren landscapes and depended on wells for survival. But mystically, the wells represent the very life force of our people. All the wells, but Miriam's stands out. It's different than all the other mystical wells in the Torah. We're told Miriam's well was created in the twilight of the very first Friday, in the first week of the existence of the world. Kabbalistically, that's a loaded statement. The first week of the world, Goddess was in creative mode, figuring things out, fixing things, working hard. The first Friday night and Saturday are the first Shabbat, the epitome of total rest, total paradise. And the mouth of Miriam's well is created in the twilight between these two states. Mystically, that's expressing that Miriam's well is a kind of bridge between imperfection and perfection, brokenness and wholeness, labor and rest, wilderness and paradise. When we gather together and put wisdom and practice at the center, not just meeting for coffee, but meeting to learn, to do, to become, that's what sustains us in a spiritual wilderness. And even more, that's what transforms our spiritual wilderness into a garden of plenty. Each episode of this podcast, we've talked about Miriam practices. Spiritual chutzpah, chakema, wait for what, tahor he, it is pure, shir l'Adonai, sing right now. Miriam's well is how we bring it all together. In community, meeting regularly, wisdom and practice at the center, drawing sustenance from the rock of our group work. We do this, we change the world. I'm not being hyperbolic. I know how small communities gathered around wisdom and practice can transform the world. I'm only here talking to you about this because of one. A little over 50 years ago, my parents joined a wave of young couples who moved to Lakewood, New Jersey, so that my father and the other men could learn in a yeshiva there, founded by refugees from Eastern Europe. When my parents joined, there was a community of maybe a couple of hundred couples. They were post-colonial, post-Holocaust, countercultural kids dreaming of rebuilding the shtetl of their grandparents in the middle of white picket fence America. They put wisdom and practice in the middle, not a wisdom or practice I endorse. They chose a patriarchal and oppressive version of ancestral wisdom and practice. But the technology of gathering at the well is powerful whether we use it to heal or harm. My parents, like their peers, became revolutionaries. They had 11 children and devoted their family to the cause. Today, there are 4,000 married men studying in Lakewood, which has become an epicenter of the yeshivish ultra-Orthodox world in America, with over 90,000 ultra-Orthodox people in the town. They have schools there, camps, musicians, magazines, a powerful economy, enormous political sway, an entire culture that arose from small groups of people gathering around practice and wisdom. They produce the men dancing on Simchas Torah that I once so enviously watched from a crack in the mechitza. We need to build the same thing, in our own way, and so much larger. Instead of the men of my childhood, dancing like bears while some people stare longingly from the sidelines, I want us to dance the way Miriam danced with the people at the shore, together. Men, women, non-binary folks, and at the center, not patriarchy, not oppression, but the embodied wisdom and practice of our forgotten female ancestors, the embodied wisdom and practice we need to survive and thrive in the spiritual wilderness. We're told that when we sing to Miriam's well, it sings back. There's a tremendous spiritual power waiting for us if we set an intention to meet in this way. It's magic of the highest order. We can channel the ancestor Miriam by forming or taking part in groups that meet to explore Miriam wisdom and other wisdom that's mystical and life-affirming and inclusive and non-patriarchal. Do you belong to a group like that? If not, would you join one? If you can't find one, will you make one? This isn't easy to do. We live in a lonely time, and the political mayhem of this moment tries to erode our communities further. But life is hard in a wilderness. So choose your hard. Choose the hard of building a community that is anchored in wisdom and practice, a community that can transform the world. I know it might sound utopic, but I truly believe there's a wellspring of Miriam that's either coming up for you right now or it will emerge soon. Your job is to be open to it. And you'll know that you've found the right place when you feel like a potted plant placed in the forest for the first time. That which has been cramped, your connection to the communal body, unfurling so that you belong fully, no part of yourself obscured, your roots and branches drenched with life-giving water that fills you with the strength to endure, and more than strength, joy and ease and hope. Let's get out of this wilderness, okay? Let's each find our wells, our anchors to gather around and build cells, many, many small communities around the country and around the world. Make sure that wisdom and practice is at the center of the group you're gathering with. But that can look many ways. You can meet with folks to discuss Miriam's wisdom that we've explored in this podcast, or you can create a book club or a pottery practice. Whatever nourishes you and helps you build community. Let's practice accessing Miriam's well together. Get comfortable in your seat. If you're in a place where you can close your eyes or lower your gaze, I invite you to do so. Place your right hand, a hand of compassion, palm down on your belly, and your left hand, hand of strength, over it. Take a deep breath in. Hold it for a moment, and then release slowly. Again, breathe in and slowly out. Imagine you're in a desolate landscape, barren, empty. The sun is burning down. Imagine you see others staggering through this wilderness, each person alone, each person dazed and disoriented. There's a rock at your feet. It looks like any of the other rocks that dot this landscape. But instead of stumbling past this rock, lurching forward, you stop. You kneel to the ground. You place your hands on the rock gently, and you sing to it.
Open up your eyes to the sunlight. Open up your heart
The rock begins to drip with water. Water begins to flow, and you cup your hands and bring the cool water to your lips, and you drink deeply. You feel the water moving through your body, nourishing you. Feel the clarity that the water gives you. Feel the seed of Miriam energy in your belly, that ancient pulse of life, a gift placed within from the ancestors. Soak in the water. See that seed growing rich roots that anchor you in the ground, stabilizing you, and a trunk that rises up your spine, keeping you supple and strong, drawing water up to energetic branches that sprout from your shoulders and crown, thick with blossoms of joy. And then lift your head and call out to the other figures in the landscape.
Take my hand, and together we will walk down this winding road.
And then there's a small group of you, drinking from the well you found, the well sent to you by Miriam. And everyone's roots are sinking deep into the ground, and everyone's trunks are rising tall, and everyone's branches are spreading out in relief. And you raise your eyes, and you're no longer in a wilderness. An orchard has risen. The trees have grown into a forest.
Walk with me together as we cross this beautiful land. Walk with me, my friend, together, all of us, hand in hand.
Take a deep breath in. Know that this is a vision of prophecy for your life. Feel how oxygen-rich the air is. Feel the comfort of the company you've curated. Feel the well flowing over your feet. Feel the love of Miriam all around. Take another deep breath in and out. When you're ready, gently bring yourself back to the present. Open your eyes if they were closed. Feel the ground beneath you, the breath in your body. Miriam's well is with you, always. And I'd like to offer you a blessing as we bring this podcast to a close. May you be blessed to remember that you were built for times like this. May you be blessed with the spiritual chutzpah to demand and shape a new era of justice, compassion, and joy. May you be blessed with a chakemah to maintain equanimity with whatever unfolds and to recognize your moment to act, your role that you get to play in this unfolding. May you be blessed with tohorahi, the ability to never lose sight of the good that dwells within every person, especially yourself. May you be blessed to dance often and in good company, to Shir L'Adonai, seize every moment of joy you get with a full and open heart. And may the well of Miriam rise before you, clear and abundant, even in the driest wilderness. May you meet other Miriam people, like you, at the well. And may the waters of the well quench your deepest thirst for wisdom, for healing, for the strength to continue. May you drink deeply and be transformed, turning pain into insight, fear into courage, exile into belonging. May you move forward with your community, knowing that you are not lost, not forsaken, but carried, nourished, and guided by the flow of something ancient, something enduring, something holy. And may you feel the tender love of the ancestor Miriam walking with you every step of the way. I'm Rabbi Jericho Vincent, and I'm so grateful to have taken this trip with you, guided by our ancestor Mora Miriam. This has been a survival guide for a spiritual wilderness. I'll see you on the path.
Walk with me together through this wild and stormy land. Walk with me, my friend, together. Reach out and take my hand. Open up your eyes to the sunlight. Open up your heart to the sun. Listen to the drum beat so steady. Together we can overcome. Take my hand and together we will walk down this winding road. Look around and together we won't fear what we don't know. Open up your eyes to the sunlight. Open up your heart to the sun. Listen to the drum beat so steady. Together we will overcome. Walk with me together as we cross this beautiful land. Walk with me, my friend, together, all of us, hand in hand.
Thanks to Ella Joy Meir for the beautiful original music, the Camphe Edges Group, to my creative partner Ben Blum, to producer extraordinaire and wise man Joey Taylor, to Mora Miriam for her guidance, and to Ruach HaOlam, the oneness within, between, and beyond us all. Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness is a part of the Judaism Unbound family of podcasts, made possible with support from Lippman Camphor Foundation for Living Torah.
Thank you, Jericho Vincent, for an incredible episode. I'm Lex Rofeberg.
I'm Rena Yehuda Newman.
And we're back for our fifth Gemara, our fifth commentary on an episode of Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness. This is our final one because this Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness podcast has concluded with its fifth episode. We have really enjoyed, Rena Yehuda and I, having these conversations where we soak in the wisdom of Jericho and of Miriam and also generate some of our own takeaways. And so we're going to do some of that today. And as a starting point, we wanted to kick off by holding the notion of belonging that comes up at the beginning of this episode and also circles back a little bit towards the end. The importance in our moment where we're facing such unbelievable tragedy in our world to lean on one another and find forms of belonging, forms of community, which is so important. And we also wanted to add some sort of next steps to that, what it might look like when we do that. So, Rena Yehuda, do you want to take us into that?
Yeah. Lex, one of my favorite parts of this episode was the concept of the Well of Miriam as being a meeting place. I was really taken by Jericho's description of the Well of Miriam being not just a source of life-giving water in a place in the desert, but there being a deeper understanding of the Well of Miriam as being the place that people who shared this orientation towards the world, this feeling of togetherness, this desire to learn, that this was the place that the Miriam Nicks would gather. And this was their spot where they would go to do Miriam related activities, right? Which was maybe dancing, maybe learning, maybe talking, maybe arguing,
Maybe rebelling.
whatever. Maybe rebelling, seems like rebelling. This is the meeting spot. I think about, for me, how much Jewish practice and Jewish ritual becomes that well. For me, I have been Shomer Shabbos now for basically about a decade. Shabbat observance in the Shomer Shabbos variety was not a part of my upbringing. And I have really felt that in the times in my life that have been the most hectic and the most painful, especially when there's actually been the most political upheaval, it has been Shabbat that has kept me as that well. I came out as trans around the time that I was also becoming Shabbat observant. And I think a lot of people find these to be contradictions, but in fact, actually, were I not taking on this practice, I don't know how I would have spiritually survived what is otherwise a very difficult process of becoming. And so when I think about this experience of returning to the well or a well as a place that gives a sense of belonging, that's what I turn to. That more than we have kept Shabbat as the Jewish people, Shabbat has kept the Jewish people. But I wanted to also zoom out about those feelings of belonging, because belonging is actually kind of a loaded word, especially in the Jewish world and especially in the Jewish institutional world. For me, many of my first associations when I hear the word belonging, there's both the kind of nice, like, I feel at home here and other people know me and other people feel connected to me and I feel connected to them. There's this other side of it, which is, do you pay dues to a synagogue?
And just to clarify that, like, people say, like, do you belong here? Like, it's like a colloquialism for synagogue membership. Like, people literally ask, do you belong here?
It makes me think about James Baldwin's essay, The Fire Next Time, in which he's talking about growing up and becoming a teenager and people asking him, whose little boy are you? Who do you belong to? That this is kind of the question where there's the implication that's both like, where are you affiliating? But there's also a question of almost who has you? Who have you given yourself to? And it's about choosing teams in a way that isn't necessarily, I think, about the nicer or maybe more spiritually connected side of belonging, which is ultimately what I think Jericho is trying to describe. That sense of like a real spiritual chavruta, or a real group of people who you feel like you have each other's backs. We talk about, when facing fascism, that we have to get organized. Now, what does that mean to get organized? It drives me up a wall when I hear that being an invocation. It's like, well, what does it mean to get organized? It means actually find a specific group of people, whether that is an institution or an organization that you share affiliation or ideology with, or like a group of like 5 to 10 people who you can meet with regularly. We don't have enough specificity about what does it mean to get organized. And we also don't have enough specificity about what it is to belong. And that the idea of belonging, where do you belong, can actually sometimes have this kind of weaponized side of it that I think is less useful than the idea of Miriam's well, which is more spiritually useful.
Yeah, I really share the questions you're asking with belonging. Do you belong to a synagogue? It's like a question on sociological studies, right? Which, when you zoom out, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, which synagogue has you? I'm remembering even a couple years ago, there was an ad during the Super Bowl that like a Christian organization placed that was trying to get people to follow Jesus, like literally and it closed with, he gets us. And from their perspective, what that meant was, Jesus understands us. He gets us. He comprehends us. But as I watched that, and I was curious, so I actually posted on Facebook, like, did other people who are Jewish feel it this way? Like, when I watched it, I was like, Jesus gets us, like grabs us, has us. It felt like this sort of tentacle thing of like, not just, I understand you. Yeah, like you've been got. Again, that's not what they meant to be saying, but in a world with the history of forced conversions of people, you know, maybe not forced conversions, but even today, like folks growing up and having kids at school, like try to teach them the good news of Jesus. Like when you put that out there, it feels like there is not only a kind thing happening, but a grabbing. And so that's the danger of belonging, right? It's like, which direction is it like a horizontal belonging where we feel connected, where we feel we belong to one another? Or is it like a vertical belonging where each of us is had by an institution or a group or a person? And what it means to belong is that each of us is, as you said, like paying dues or doing some affiliational act. And like, it's very cynical what I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying all synagogues are like trying to manipulate and be terrible when they talk about belonging. I do think that it brings up some of those issues. And I don't know, I'm flashing to, I have a more sunny association to the word longing than I do belonging. And so I kind of want to read this as like, always be longing. Have a group of people that you are longing with, that you are yearning toward. Like that's what you were getting at with sort of having a spiritual something, a purpose underneath the belonging. What I get cynical about in Jewish life and beyond is sometimes this sense that like, oh, being with a group of people in and of itself, just like that's the goal. And this epidemic of loneliness, and we're all struggling and we're bowling alone and all the things that people write think pieces about. It's like the final sentence is always like, find other people. And I'm like, yes, then direct something to get like, and when I say direct, I don't mean like direct others. I mean like channel a vector in a direction, like do something generative with a group of people. And synagogues, and other organizations and other spaces, I think they're better at the game of let's belong, let's get a bunch of people together than they are let's belong with one another and then do something with that belonging. I'm going to give one last sort of wordplay thing, and this one's Hebrew. There's this notion in Pirkei Avot, in the section of the Mishnah that gives a bunch of greatest hits of teachings from some early rabbis. One of them says, Aseh lecha rav, which means it's traditionally translated, find for yourself a rabbi. In the Hebrew, it's make yourself to a rabbi. It's almost like you could read it as like become a rabbi. That doesn't seem to be what the Hebrew is trying to do, which is why people translate it differently. But make for yourself a rabbi. Find somebody to be a teacher, seems to be the teaching. And then the next phrase is koneh lecha chaver. Acquire for yourself or find for yourself a friend. But if you read that a little differently, the word rav in Hebrew doesn't only mean rabbi, it means many. It means multitude, like an Erev Rav, like a mixed multitude that left Egypt. And so if you read it as Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself or make of yourself many, it's a teaching to find that group of spiritually aligned people. And then the next step, koneh lecha chaver, find for yourself a friend. The word chaver doesn't only mean friend, it means that which binds us. So here we are unbound, but find for yourself a form of binding. The word machberet, notebook, is the same root as chaver because it's like a bound spiral notebook. Make for yourself a binding to other people and make for yourself many, like make of yourself sort of a greater whole, Aseh lecha rav. So that feels to me what Jericho's getting at more than just sort of belonging, which I say not because Jericho wasn't clear, but because I think so many people out there in Jewish life are just saying, belong, like find your synagogue, find your place, as opposed to find your group of people that's going to channel something incredible and liberatory into the world.
I really, really love this interpretation of this Pirkei Avos quote. That's one of my favorite teachings, and I really like thinking about it in this more zoomed out sense of find yourself a multitude and find yourself a binding. One of the things that, as you were talking, I was thinking about how culturally we're actually really bad at belonging and affiliation, right? We talk about the fact that we live in this very atomized, isolated culture. Jericho says in this podcast, we live in a very lonely time. And I think a lot of that is because we place emphasis on affiliation and labels more so than either specificity and practice. Part of what makes the teaching of Miriam's well strong is that these people are gathering around the well to do well-based activities. That actually you need to be doing a thing in order to connect with people. It is actually not...
They're trying to do well.
They're trying to do well. They're trying to do well together. And that you have to do something in order to maintain a connection. Right? I have a long-distance transatlantic marriage. And part of what keeps that relationship alive is that we do things together across distance. We build ideas together, and we have to do things together in order to have that relationship grow. We're so concerned with, do you pay membership dues to Beth-El Synagogue, right? And therefore you can label yourself as a member of Beth-El. Or do you identify as transgender? Do you identify as insert identity label here? And that ends up actually being a flattening about the substance and quality and specificity of our lives, which are not homogenous. To find your people, yes, you may have a lot of identity-based connection. And I often feel more connected to or more easily connected to people who I might share one of these identity-based labels with. But inside of that, there needs to be a greater specificity. And one of the things that I think is very cool about the teaching that Jericho is bringing about the Morim, about the people who Moshe calls out as saying, all right, you Morim, we're going to try to get water from the rock, and reading it as Miriam people, is that this is a breakout group among the Israelites. This is actually, like, this is a club. This is not all of the Israelites are here, actually. I don't think that Moshe is necessarily calling all of the Israelites Morim. Maybe he is. But there's kind of this understanding of, like, this is the club that gathers at the well. And these people like each other for a reason that's more than, oh, we are all just Israelites in the desert. They're like, there's a real affinity group happening here. There's a spiritual quality to that connection. They come up with this label, or he spontaneously calls them this thing. Or maybe they started calling
the
themselves
Miriam
this
people
thing.
or the Morim, yeah.
Right, that maybe the Morim started calling themselves that, and that's like a midrash that we don't have. Or maybe Moshe spontaneously comes up with this label because he's actually noticing that there is something different about this group of people that is based on the thing that they're actually doing together. And I think it's important to remember when we're having these conversations about it is good to belong, is what are we belonging over? Because the etymology of fascism is about the fasces. Fasces in the ancient world were bundles of sticks that were bound together tightly and made it a really strong weapon that could not be broken. So fascism is also very much about belonging. But what are you belonging around? Are you belonging around a well, or are you belonging around an axe? And I do think that actually being thoughtful about what that thing is allows us to have a better political analysis about the ways that we are protecting ourselves from authoritarianism.
Yeah, I'm realizing that the moments we have in Torah where you have like a group that is recognized that is not just a tribe, like a group within the Israelites, that, as you described, is connecting around some shared connection that is not just, we're all from the tribe of Reuben, we're all from the tribe of Naphtali. It's typically when there's rebels. Here, Morim is, it's like, we don't know exactly what it means. It's translated you rebels, but like it means teachers. It could be Miriam people, all of this. The other key moment where there's intertribal collaboration is the rebellion of Korach and Datan and Aviram and 200, I forget what it is, either 200 or 300 others. Korach is from the tribe of Levi. Datan and Aviram are from the tribe of Reuben. And they are connecting because they share this notion that all the people are holy, not just Moses and Aaron. And historically, we read them as very bad. And I'm not going to say the Torah is fascist. I don't think it's that smooth and simple. I do think there are tendencies in the Torah to paint groups that question centralized authority as bad. And that comes up in this story of the rebels with Korach and Datan and Aviram. And it comes up maybe with you Morim, you rebels, you Miriam people in this story, which are two of the only moments where people seem to be connecting around not just the organized hierarchy that has been implemented in their society. So I'm going to have to sit with that more and think about the ramifications, because acts of questioning the main authorities seem to be moments of intertribal collaboration where people actually connect around something that is not just their family ties. Another wordplay that's worth looking at, in addition to this Miriam people, Morim, that I love from Jericho, is the word mateh. So Jericho uses it. There's this moment where Moses hits the rock with a mateh, with a staff, with a stick, basically. The word mateh is also, it's the word for a tribe. So as we're talking here about belonging, like it's not associated with an individual. Like when we think of a staff, we often think of somebody walking at the front of a group, like holding a stick, right? You know, Gandalf style, or in this case, Moses style. But a staff, a mateh, in Hebrew and in English, interestingly enough, is a group word. So in Hebrew, matot, that's a Torah portion that comes shortly after this story, actually, and it's referring to tribes, the 12 of them. But it means sticks, in addition to tribes. In English, the word staff, when you talk about like an organization's staff, it's their team, it's the set of people that are part of it, a coaching staff, like all of these words. And so we have this seed already to upend the separation between sort of an individual holding their stick and leading by themselves versus a broader collective. And so I think that's worth noticing. It's sort of a teaching that the way Moses goes about this is he just sort of whacks the rock with the staff, to use your axe versus well metaphor. Like he goes axe in that moment as opposed to speaking to the rock. But we, with our various staffs, could understand it more collectively and not just as like one person wielding a stick.
Gets at the idea of what is leadership aimed towards and what is leadership aimed at. And highlighting Miriam as a leadership figure, I think, really highlights a cultural tension where we see leaders that are truly only thinking of themselves. And it's so obvious, it's so clear that the staff is this sort of singular object that is about having people follow, and then doing this sort of brute force actions with it, versus the staff that is about the many, such that there can be a staff of people gathered around the staff. I love this particular wordplay about the multiplicity of the concept of a staff, or the mate or matot, and that leadership at its best is leadership that is towards a communal end. That you're not guiding a bunch of people who are simply following you without a second thought, is that you are leading people to actually be able to self-govern. There's a sense that a leader leads with their back rather than with their finger. They're not pointing to somewhere and saying, go. They're saying, I'm going to do this thing, and I would love if you came with me. And actually, I need you. I think that there's also a Kabbalistic element to it, or at least in Hasidic philosophy, there's a teaching that comes up around the high holidays, and we are going to be entering into Elul soon, that Hashem is Melech, Hashem is royalty, Hashem is king, and Hashem can't be a king without a people. It's the one thing, actually, that God can be so many things, but without us, God can't be king. And so there's this connection, regardless of how you feel about the language of monarchy. And I think there are plenty of Jews who take issue with, rightly so, the concepts of monarchy or top-down power hierarchy. And that's much of what we're discussing in this wrap here. But thinking about the idea that leadership is about an interdependent relationship between groups of people. It's actually not always one person who is the leader. It shifts around. We see that in the story of Moshe and Aaron and Miriam, that there are many different leaders. And then there are moments in which it's people who are not any of those people, like Nachshon, who are stepping up and taking initiative. And actually the greater collective really needs that. So when we're thinking about belonging, I think some of that question of belonging is about what leadership responsibilities are you individually taking on within a group of people who you're experiencing real affinity with, not just a label-based identification.
Absolutely. I really, really appreciate the connections you're drawing. And on the leadership front, there's so many applications of all this. And one last moment, and I realize we're getting a lot of Moses-centered stories in here in the podcast about Miriam, but we'll close with her in a second. There's that glorious moment that I take as a teaching on leadership where the Israelites are at war. They're fighting a different tribe. And Moses, it seems, for whatever set of reasons, when Moses holds his staff in the air, we're back to the mateh, and I did check, it's the mateh. There's two words for staff, and it uses mateh there. When he holds his tribe in the air, his staff in the air, his rod in the air, the people win the battle. And when his hands sort of get weak and he's not able to hold the staff in the air, that's when the people start losing. And what happens? Two other people, Aaron and a fellow named Hur, go and support Moses's hands as he is holding this mateh, this staff, so that he can keep it up in the air. And so even though the battle victory seems to correlate with what Moses is doing, it's actually two other people supporting him that makes that possible. I take that as Aaron is kind of the visible leader. He's the person who talks to the press conferences, like the press secretary or whatever. And Hur is a stand-in for kind of a more invisibilized set of people. Hur is not somebody that if you ask a typical person on the street, like, who's Hur? They're not going to be able to say who that is from the Bible. And yet he is playing this role in holding up one of Moses' arms so that the people can win this battle. And that's not just Hur. That's sort of a stand-in for all of the people that are not seen and understood, who are playing a role in the collective well-being of the Israelite nation in that story. And what's interesting about Hur, his descendant is Bezalel, who builds the tabernacle. And I believe, I'm going to have to go check, that Hur is associated with Miriam to some degree. I believe there's some Talmudic understandings of Hur being related to Miriam, or I don't know, like something like that. Which brings us to that closing piece of Jericho's, or for us closing piece, but it opened this episode around Havdalah. This notion that what Miriam brings in the Havdalah service, the separation between Shabbat and the rest of the week, is in opposition to Elijah. So we have these two songs, and Elijah is the first. Elijah is the one that we hear most frequently, and it's just like, Elijah, 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 he's good. Eliyahu, 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 Hagiladi. Like, he's this guy from this tribe. He's really good. We're welcoming him to our Shabbat closing. Miriam is a collective presence who, as Jericho says, tirkod itanu, dances with us, and is not about like leading for us, but rather gathering us all together. That's why the well that you described is that place of gathering. I'm really inspired by the ways in which Miriam can teach us on that front. What I want to make sure we name, though, is that this Miriam song, Miriam tirkod itanu, litaken et ha'olam, Miriam dances with us in the spirit of repairing the world, that's a very recently written song. It's actually written by a teacher of mine, my director of studies when I was in rabbinical school, Layla Berner, who is also a Rebbe of Jericho's. And that was written like 35 years ago. And Jericho's citing it in that beautiful way, in that chutzpahdik, audacious way, as an ancient piece of wisdom. Because it is, and it will go down as one. And when people are marking Havdalah in the future, they won't necessarily know that it was written super recently. And that's the power of Jewish tradition, that we make new, but then we mark old. Like we make something new and then we mark it as ancient and storied. It's a flattening of time for the purpose of the deflattening of time. It's like collapsing everything into one eternal time stream so that everybody across the timeline in all generations can receive it and shape it. And Rena Yehuda, I want to pass it to you to give our final note on that front, on the Havdalah piece.
One of the things that's really beautiful about the teaching of Miriam of being something that is about gathering collectively is the notion that we just can't do it alone. We come from a culture that many of the stories of bravery that we have involve a knight individually vanquishing a dragon, that it's a lot of stories that involve courage as being a truly individual act. It's even true Jewishly. We often do a thing where we look at leaders in this very individual standpoint, like Nachshon, when he steps into the Red Sea and it parts, and that he's the one who is just brave enough to do it. But the truth is, it takes other people in order for us to be brave. When we think about the bystander effect, we think about harassment when it happens in public, it's often harder to intervene as an individual. But if you turn to someone around you, or you have a friend and you say, hey, I think we should do something, and the other person says, yeah, we should do something, it's way easier to step in. And one of the biggest teachings that Miriam has for us in this moment is that in order to not be bystanders, in order to interrupt authoritarianism, in order to interrupt a violent and dominant and pervasive narrative that is everywhere, we actually can't do it alone. And in fact, it is dangerous to try to do it alone. To think about these moments of not just celebration, but also courage as being something that requires a group of well people, it's a better invocation to talk about belonging as being, who are the people who are going to have your back when you have to step up? Who are the people who you can turn to say, I think I need to be brave and I'm afraid? And they say, we're going to come up with a game plan because we ourselves are also rebels. And we will do this in a way that is effective. We will do this in a way that is courageous. We will do this in a way that is protective. And we will do this in a way that makes us more free. That's the biggest teaching of Miriam for this moment when we talk about what it is to belong.
Amen. we hope that this will be a launching point for you, that this will allow you to do that work of aseh l'charav, finding yourself a multitude and being bound to them and channeling that into the world. This may be a little shameless, but like Judaism Unbound has some ways to do that. One of them is Elul Unbound, which is this way of journeying through the month of Elul, through the final month before Rosh Hashanah, the new year, that's associated with introspection and sort of self-improvement. We try to have that not just be a self-improvement, but sort of a collective-minded, all of us together, supporting one another, growing together. And so Elul Unbound, we actually have a number of moments throughout the month where we'll be gathering and where we can channel some of these teachings from Mora Miriam, from our teacher Miriam, and from our teacher Jericho as well, that has enhanced my sense of belonging in the positive sense. And so we hope that you'll check those out. You can do so at judaismunbound.com/Elul, ELUL. And also keep your eye out for other forms of convening and belonging that are not just in our Judaism Unbound spaces. There's so many digital spaces that are sort of specialists in convening those who struggle to convene in offline Jewish spaces, people who feel on the margins. And so we hope that you will look not only to us, but to other forms of gathering and belonging as well. So thank you for following along with us. Thank you for hopefully being in touch with us and sending your own Gemaras, your own commentaries on Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness. You can be in touch via hello@judaismunbound.com. We're so grateful that you checked this out. We hope that you'll subscribe to Survival Guide for a Spiritual Wilderness in the case that there are future episodes that drop there, but also that you'll subscribe to the other podcasts in our family of podcasts. This has been an incredible first experiment in Rena Yehuda and I generating these Gemaras. We'll be on the lookout for other forms of experimenting where Judaism Unbound's podcast and our other podcasts in the family of podcasts can themselves co-belong to one another. So thank you so much for listening. This has been a great set of conversations, and with that, this has been Judaism Unbound.